Welcome to another episode of Pound for Pound Box Report. Episode 282. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, Gail from Communities Digital News. Um, don't be fooled by the part timer. That's he fooled me in the private when he jumped on before the show. That is part timer, aka corruption in boxing. What's going on, lady and Mister Part Timer?
Everybody joining you from Las Vegas.
Hey, Mike. Gail.
Indeed, and I hope to have Daniel from the Inscriber. He having a bit of tech issues, but I hope to scramble some things out behind the scenes and get him on. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report, live YouTube show, podcast, as well as blog discussing all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, we will talk about it. All information, just go to the blog page, p4pboxreport.wordpress.com. Um, Top right of the blog page, you will find links to where to find us all over social media, where to find us on all RSS platforms that carry podcast streams. Um, the links to where you can donate, got a Cash Me and PayPal donation links. And last but certainly not least, the link to my online fitness coach page. I am an online coach for beachbody.com. If you're interested in any programs like Lift for P90X, Insanity, 6 weeks of the Word, which is about to drop for the masses in April. But for folks like myself who are coaches who are checking it out now, really good program when it officially drops in April. I suggest that folks really check it out. They want some challenging workouts or products like Shakeology, Energize, the new Beachbody pre-workout, a bit stronger than the current version. The new one is really will get you amped up. And before we begin the show, I want to thank everybody who joined us live last week. Everybody in the live chat, it was popping last week. Um, I want to thank everybody who joined us on last week's show for the live show. Let's get things started. Recapping, and I want to thank Hand History Vault who's joined us right now. Thanks for joining us, sir. Uh, Going to recap things from last week. Kind of a limited number of fights this past week, but some interesting things in the aftermath of those fights. I'll go to you, Gail, since you was at this particular card in Anaheim, I believe it was on the zone. Headliner was Ryan Garcia versus Francisco Fonseca. Undercard was Jorge Linares against Carlos Morales. Uh, Garcia fought Fonseca, excuse me, stops him in roughly 80 seconds. Counter left hook, boom, landed on him, puts Fonseca down and out. Linares uh, stopped Morales in round four. He knocked him down in the third, finished him off in the fourth. Being ringside for the fight, Gail, your observation of both of those fights, the crowd, the atmosphere, particularly since this card took place on Valentine's Day, your reaction to the both fights and the event in its entirety.
So let's talk about the event overall. It was held in the Honda Center, which is the major sports venue in Anaheim, California, where the Anaheim Ducks NHL team plays. That's probably the most familiar to most people. And so this is a major, 15, 17,000 capacity seat venue. To a little bit of my surprise, well over 10,000 fans were in the seat on a Friday night it on Valentine's Day, and there was quite the buzzy number of internet celebrities there. They were being
Well,
introduced as at most fights before the main event, especially if there's a lull because the co-main was a knockout, which it was. The ring announcer will start announcing the celebrities in the house, and we had some NFL players and some locals, and then Logan Paul, and then it's Paul, and then it's
why mention though that fake fighter on my show, Gail?
I'll tell you why. Because that crowd is who filled those seats. those online influencers, they have welcomed Garcia into the fold as one of their own, and love it or hate it, to the crowd that was there, they were just as much celebrities as the NFL players that were announced, to my surprise. And to the point that influencers were introduced. Instagram influencers. Now, these are the contemporary counterpart, in my opinion, to someone who hawks a product on TV commercials. But nevertheless, all those butts were in the seats. They had a great time. They were there early. They enjoyed themselves. So that was a win, a big win for Golden Boy Promotions and Oscar de la Hoya. Very, very happy. And he was smart enough to have sitting next to him ringside and making the rounds with him, Virgil Ortiz Jr. These are the two guys they're counting on to start generating revenue and be the heirs apparent to the day when their cash cow, Canelo, is finally retired. So let's start with the co-main event with Jorge Linares. This was a fight for him at 135 after his sort of ill-fated experiment fighting at 140. I remarked to the person next to me in the media section that from my vantage point, I could count every single lumbar in that man's spine. He had that little meat on his bones at 135. But he fought well. He looked sharp. He had a little cut open over the left eyebrow. What's new with Jorge? It didn't end up being a factor. So Jorge did his job. His job was to win that fight and tee up a gatekeeper-style big-name opponent for Garcia. Garcia comes out to much fanfare, much excitement. His opponent was Francisco Fonseca, who is a Nicaraguan, who had Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez in his corner, among other people. The Nicaraguan fights, they're all there. That's just how it works. And Fonseca has fought some of the big names that are potential opponents for Garcia, namely Tevin Farmer and Tank Davis. Now, Fonseca has lost to both. He went the distance with Farmer. He got knocked out by Davis. So here's the measuring stick. How would Garcia deal with Fonseca as measured against Farmer, who went the distance, Davis, who got the 9th round knockout? 80 seconds into the fight, we had our answer. And that punch was definitive. It was on point. It was a one-hitter quitter, done and over. And the crowd went nuts. Garcia, to his credit, curbed his celebration until Fonseca was okay. That was one of those shots where the opponent is out cold before they hit the canvas, so they have no, physical, breaks to put on. The head snaps off the canvas. It was just a super dramatic knockout.
Yeah, and then his head bounced when he hit the canvas, which made it much worse.
He turned out to be okay. That was all good. Here's what impressed me. The punch was great, no question about it, and brilliantly executed. What I was impressed with was the post-fight interview where Garcia described in technical detail, step by step, how he executed the plan, and that he had devised the plan from A, watching Sugar Ray Robinson video, and B, watching Fonseca video, and noting some of his tells, some of his ticks, and using what he learned from both to take advantage of it, get him to drop his right hand, thinking something was, or drop his guard, thinking he was having the opportunity to come after Garcia, so he was leading him in, and then shot that left hand right on the kisser. That ability at that age, 21, to so precisely describe how that game plan was put together and executed was so impressive. And very few boxers of any age can really come up with a description like that. That's what tells me that Garcia is the real deal. So what's expected to happen that is since Linares won his fight, Garcia won his fight, that they'll likely have a fight later this summer sometime. Later this summer looks to be July 11th in Los Angeles at the Staples Center. De La Hoya and Golden Boy already have a hold on the date. And that's a good gatekeeper fight, in my opinion, for Garcia. It's not Linares in his prime, which no one in their right mind should put Garcia against Linares in his prime. But he's slightly on the downhill side, still a worthy opponent, still dangerous, just dangerous enough, and a name that Garcia can put on his resume. It's a good test, and it might very well be a 50-50 fight.
I'm going to you right now, Gus, because prior to this bout, you left me a message in Skype. This goes along with this card because I don't know if you saw the fight itself. If you did, you can comment on the fights. But you was mentioning a middleweight, I believe, who fought on this card that we should keep an eye out on. Talk about that fighter that you was mentioning to me privately, and give some insight on that particular fighter for those who are unaware.
Yeah, a middleweight Mike from Uzbekistan, Tamir Melakuev, who's interesting. He's now going back to the Olympics to contest for the gold medal, but he's a former he's a former medalist in the Olympics, World Championships. He lost in the final, I think, in Hamburg against a Cuban. So he's decorated both world and Olympic. Southpaw, middleweight, very aggressive, but he's got an all-round, very decent boxing ability. Very, very good feet. Really good dexterity. Timing is super aggressive power puncher, but his body punching is really, really of interest now. I think he was due to fight Paraband, who's fought a lot of the sort of super middleweight fighters in the past, all of the champions like DeGale and that, etc. But I think he pulled out and somebody else stepped in last minute and to his detriment, I think Melakuev, pretty much destroyed him in a round or 2 rounds, 4 knockdowns. But yeah, I certainly think he'll be a middleweight champion, Mike, soon.
Okay.
We lost him.
Yeah, and I think
let me add to that. Melakuev, who's also called Beck the Bully, is one of the 3 Uzbeki fighters, all training in Indio, California, with Joel Diaz. That also includes MJ Akhmadaliev, who just beat Daniel Roman, and he was present, and Israel Madrimov, who is on one of the big upcoming cards on an undercard. And these guys are hungry. They work their asses off in the gym. They have great amateur backgrounds. And they have a little community out there in Indio now to support each other. And these are the guys, very much like the Ukrainian wave that came along a few years ago with Lomachenko and Bosnick and and Usyk. Now we've got Madrimov, Akhmadaliev, Murtazaliev, and they're tearing it up with records of 4-0, 5-0, 7-0, and killing it. And these are not technical fighters; they can be, but they are all 2-1 knockout punchers. And Beck is the biggest of the 3. All should be watched.
I will go to you, Daniel. I see your question, Olaf. To Gail, we will talk. I will ask her that question in a few. I will ask her that question in a few minutes once we finish talking about this particular card. Briefly, give your breakdown of the Garcia and Linares fights. And talk about kind of some interesting back and forth that took place after Garcia's win specifically. They had Devin Haney up in the ring, and you can tell they were kind of planting the seeds towards an eventual fight between Garcia and Haney long term. In connection with that, the back and forth between Haney, his trainer dad, and one Bernard Hopkins that took place also after the fight, once the uh, airing of the card was over on the zone. Some interesting words were exchanged. If you're there, Daniel, unmute your mic.
As it seems that Daniel's technical issues are continuing, would you like me to step in? There we go.
Yeah, it does not look like my laptop wants to cooperate.
Do you need to repeat the question?
Yeah, because literally this is the third time that Chrome crashed on me.
Okay. Give you a brief breakdown of the Ryan Garcia and Linares wins, and also talk about kind of interesting moments that took place after the bout. The zone, they had Devin Haney, who's a WBC lightweight champion, in the ring. They had a bit of back and forth, Haney and Garcia. In connection to that, there was an interesting exchange between Devin Haney, his dad slash trainer, and one Bernard Hopkins, in which they was talking about the future for both. Talked about the prospect of Haney fighting Garcia, kind of threat, I'll use for lack of a better word, that you heard from Haney's dad, if they were not to get an eventual fight against Garcia. Talk about all of that.
All right, well, the Linares fight, I can give a good analogy of it. It's not as drastic as this, but if you remember the Eric Morales versus Marcos Maidana fight, where everybody pretty much assumed that Morales was being thrown to the wolves, fighting at 140 for the first time, 34 years old, against at the time, like I said, a young, hungry Maidana, and he almost pulled it off. He almost pulled it off, and it was a situation where the big difference that Linares won this fight. He won by knockout, but the phrase that I would go by is when Max Kellerman said, like, there's still greatness left in Eric Morales. There's still greatness left in Jorge Linares. Unfortunately, he's in a division where there's a lot of young, hungry fighters that will be able to test him. That being said, one of the ones we talk about is going to be Ryan Garcia. And Ryan Garcia did a really good job in countering to land that left hook. Landed in the precise area when you knew where Fonseca was trying to land his shot and not seen as a count. Now, great sportsmanship on him not boasting and worrying about Fonseca as an opponent. Like, you've just seen a lot more of that lately, and we do see a whole lot more of that pretty soon. The main thing you can take away from the Garcia fight is that you're starting to see some of the technical aspects that the Reynosos are putting up in him, and you're going to see it probably. You're going to start seeing it more and more. Oscar Valdez, and I said, other fighters that are training in that area, because say what you will, like, yeah, it's not a situation where, like with Danny Garcia, where his father only trains him, and there's a reason why he's trained him. It's not because people don't want to train under Ranger Garcia or anything, but it shows the tactic, and it shows that with Ryan Garcia, he can learn. that he's willing to learn. And most importantly, as much as we can pretty much make fun of him for like being a lot of Instagram from it and thinking he's been focusing more on social media and all that, I think we can pretty much say now at this stage that we can take him a lot more seriously as a fighter than we do now. It's not just somebody that is just there for the Instagram posts. Here's where we're going to run into the issue when it comes to Devin Haney. Haney is a champion now. Granted, he's a champion through the great machinery of the WBC. And
machinery or the word that you love to use that starts with F?
Okay, yeah, I wanted to keep it PG. Yeah, okay, the fuckery of the WBC. Plain old fuckery of the WBC. But it doesn't mean that he's worthy of the title, which he is. Like, he's proven that he's there to be a champion, but there's two things I wouldn't do. Like, okay, you try to build up a fight there. You know you're in a network where there's no network issues, and you're seeing Garcia lay everything out when it comes to like the different types of fighters. And Haney, like, in proper trash talk, says, see how he mentioned my name last? That's pretty much to tell you what he thinks. But then for your dad to come at Bernard Hopkins the way he did. Now, if people should realize that it doesn't matter how long somebody's been out of prison, there's a reason that person went to prison. And at any moment, now, we're talking about Bernard Hopkins, one of the most disciplined people we have met post-prison on earth. Like, this is a guy who is known, especially when it comes to training, to follow a schedule to such a point that you can literally set your clock to it. But before this 20 years, he went to jail for really, really, really bad things. Even a person as this person, Bernard Hopkins, you come at him like that, you always risk that person that he was before he went to prison coming out. It takes balls to do it. It shows that Haney wants to get big fights because at the end of the day, what did you see from a marketing standpoint? What did you see from a, like I said, a marketing, money-making standpoint? You saw a fighter that is not even challenging for like a regional belt at the moment, pack an arena on his name. It wasn't like supported like the co-main event was another great fight. No. Was another great fighter really known in the area? No. Ryan Garcia is the person that filled out those seats. So that pretty much, that shows to Devin Haney, yeah, I need to make this fight now because I can make money from it now. So there's many ways to take in, but I'm sorry, I would never come at Bernard Hopkins the way Devin Haney's dad came at Bernard Hopkins, because I'm afraid. Because as much as I love Bernard Hopkins, there's a part of me that is scared of him.
And that's why you see him at the weigh-ins as the de facto security guard for Golden Boy. And speaking to what you just said, Daniel, Bernard is still that disciplined. Bernard still eats and keeps himself fit as if he might have a fight next month. I mean, I'm sure he's at fighting weight. It's truly astonishing. That man is so disciplined. It's incredible. And that discipline probably kept him from clocking Haney Sr. after he came at him. He's disciplined enough to know that is not the time nor the place in front of a lot of video YouTuber journalists to get into it. Now, it did set off, the influencer YouTuber universe who were all aghast at, seeing this stuff because they're all still so new to it. But, whether we as boxing purists, love it or hate it, what's important to all of us is that these are the stars of the future. These are going to introduce people to the sport who may get hooked on boxing as a whole, not just Ryan Garcia. They're going to see guys on the undercard they like, and we're going to breed the next generation of fans, and that needs to happen. However it happens, that needs to happen. And
I just think,
and seeing who was in that arena was really it was impressive in a way. It was a little head scratching seeing these YouTubers being introduced to celebrities, and believe me, when they showed up, half of the crowd got up and chased after them like little girls after BTS. I mean, it was pretty crazy, but really, there's nothing wrong with that. The product in the ring, as long as the product in the ring is quality and the fighters are disciplined and approach this with quality, I'm fine with it. I don't care whose butts are in the seats.
let's see, looks like Daniel's having. Okay, Daniel is back. It seems like just to me, just sheer emotionality on the part of the Haney crew, particularly his dad, uh, in that little back and forth with Hopkins that took place after the broadcast feed went off. One of the things that he told Hopkins was, if we don't get the fight, we're moving up to 140 pounds. Sir, no, you're not. There's too much money for you to be made
But this was all
for a potential fight with Haney, with Garcia, excuse me, if all goes well in 2020. Um, say what you want about Ryan Garcia, Gus. Um, Garcia is about to be a cash cow if things keep progressing on. Based on what you've heard so far, your reaction to kind of the back and forth, and from a business perspective, Haney's folks can say whatever they want, but still, even though he's the champion, he may not hold all the cards in this. If you're there, Gus, unmute your mic.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't see any of the Devin Haney's. Quite frankly, he's an irrelevant and insignificant fighter. I've got nothing really to comment on him. He's too busy calling out so many different fighters. If he had any sense of pride, he would be looking to regain his title, which he received by FedEx. He should be looking for Luke Campbell or Javier Fortuna. That should be that should be the limit of his conversation. Nothing more, nothing else. But in terms of Garcia and Jorge Linares, Mike, the spectacular performances of both of those fighters has now created real anticipation for their showdown later on this year. Now we really couldn't say that before the fight, but now it's looking like a real mouth-watering fight, and we've all expressed a lot of vitriol towards Ryan Garcia, maybe not Gail, but definitely myself and some of the others. But the affiliation with the Rhinoceros is paying dividends. He's looking spectacular, Mike. He's making a fucking statement, knocking out these Kit Kats in a round. Now you can microanalyze it and say, well, Fonseca was dragged up from 130-pound super featherweight to 135, but still, he knocked him out with a spectacular with a left hook.
Yeah, and Tank didn't do that when he fought him.
Sorry?
Neither did Former.
Yeah. Well, Tank had to resort to punches at the back of the head. They were illegal blows, Mike, and he was losing that fight as well. I think Fonseca was up certainly on my card. So impressive. Now, Linares, he's been working a lot with Mr. Honda from what I saw, working the pads, some Honda likes to put these guys through drills, certainly on hand speed and combination. And so Ryan Garcia is now facing somebody potentially, Mike, who's comparable in that department of speed, certainly hand speed, enough to cause him.
I think he having technical issues on here. Again, let's move on to talk about Caleb Plant. Specifically, he fought this Garcia Linares card took place on the 14th, which was on a Thursday. No, it was on a Friday, I believe. The following night, the following night, the 15th, in his hometown of Nashville, Caleb Plant defended his IBF 168-pound belt for the second time against a fighter who we kind of made fun of in terms of his name last week. It's still funny. I don't care what none of y'all say. Feigenbutz stopped him in, I want to say, 10. Plant dominated all night long, Daniel. Your reaction to this fight, because I know the ringside crew, Goosen and Lennox Lewis, particularly Goosen, was giving Plant high praise, suggesting that he may be the best in the division and whatnot. And certainly he looked good. And in the aftermath of it, talk about him and Canelo, and we're going to touch on that a bit. I'm like, okay, but he fought a guy by the name of Feigenbutz who was really a middleweight. A little bit of hyperbole here. Are folks guilty of hyperbole in the aftermath of this win?
Well, you got to do what you got to do when you don't have a monopoly in the division. Right now, nobody really has a monopoly on super middleweight at the moment. So it's smart to actually do this in this audience standpoint, because this is an audience that despite Caleb Plant fighting Feigenbutz, I don't know how to pronounce it either. It's either Feigenbutz or Feigenbutz. It still garnered over 1 million viewers. Now, we have to remember this was also at the same time. I don't think it was the same around the same time that NBA All-Star Weekend is happening, and you have the Saturday night events. Like, we always had the skills competition, obviously the 3-point contest, the slam dunk contest. You're competing with that, and you still got a pretty decent amount of viewers. So that's one thing. But the thing about it, when it comes to Plant, he did what he was supposed to do. It's one thing to just point out that he did what he was supposed to. It's another thing to really embellish it. And they did have to embellish it a little bit, because right now you're looking at the state of the division. It's scattered, so unifications are going to be pretty hard to come by. And when you have that factor into how the fights can be made, of course you're going to hype up your guy. Now, does that mean that you actually make a viable shot? No. Okay, you sold out. You sold out your hometown. That's good. There's not a lot of people out there that can actually do it unless they're a superstar. And ultimately, when it comes to this fight, like I said, he did what he was supposed to do. I think the fight should have been stopped probably 1 or 2 rounds earlier, because at a certain point, Feigenbutz was not even really trying at a certain point. They got to the 7th round. He just pretty much stopped trying. But he got a victory. He took care of this fight, this mandatory. I think Feigenbutz was a mandatory.
Yeah, he was. There's no number 1 or number 2 contender in the IBF. Feigenbutz was number 3, and so technically, yeah, this was the mandatory.
Yeah, so he took care of that. Now he can chase the fights. The question now we're planned is he able to draw out the other fighters in the division, particularly, like I said, we want to mention one. You mentioned Canelo, but Canelo to me has to decide what weight he actually wants to stay at first.
Let's talk about that, Gail, and I'll go to the question here in the chat. Brief commentary on the fight if you want, but after the fight, Plant said that he wants a unification bout against David Benavidez, who gave a nice clap back on Instagram to Plant's challenge. They've been beefing with each other really almost a year now on social media, and they even had a dust up last year. Plant, Benavidez, as well as Benavidez's brother. But there was also talk of a fight against one Canelo Alvarez, who's still searching for an opponent. In May, Cinco de Mayo weekend, we'll talk about that a little bit in the news. Plant was asked about a fight against Canelo, and from his perspective, he was like, one, it's a little bit pushing it in terms of time preparation. Two, he had a fear that essentially that Team Canelo is trying to do to him what they did to Kovalev, have him come back quickly after about taking short-term money, if you will, putting him in a position where he's not in the best position to put forward against Canelo. Kovalev took the bout on short notice. Essentially, he has since gave regret to that decision. Plant doesn't want to be put in that same position himself. Olaf in the chat says, wrong question here. Why would Plant reject the Canelo fight? Seems pretty foolish, right? Your reaction to the talk of Plant and Canelo, as well as Caleb's Plant's response to a possible fight against Canelo in Cinco de Mayo weekend, and how he's basically said no, and basically accused Team Canelo, Golden Boy, whatnot, of trying to pull a fast one on the folks on the media and whatnot.
Caleb Plant has learned his lessons from Uncle Al Heyman extremely well. And in this case, he's absolutely right from his perspective. He would be rushing in with no break between training camps to take this fight with Canelo. Instead, it is far better for him to wait, get his break, refresh, then go back into training, have a fight with David Benavidez. And meanwhile, we're all assuming at this point, it looks like the Canelo sweepstakes is going to boil down to Billy Joe Saunders. And that becomes a unification fight, as does the Plant Benavidez fight. So then they each come in with 2 belts, and that gives Plant so much more negotiating juice, because then you've got a legitimate division unification fight for all the marbles. And it makes Plant a lot more valuable as the opponent, and it puts him in a far better position to negotiate his purse and whatever other perks. And very smart for him not to rush into the fight. Also, Plant is younger and fresher than Canelo. It's not going to hurt him one bit to wait. So let's just see if the fight goes down. Maybe I don't think it'll happen this year to get in all these unifications. It might, but it certainly could be next Cinco de Mayo 2021's fight. This was a very smart strategic move by Plant, in my opinion, for him to be patient, raise his worth, and then the risk-reward ratio is so much better for him. Yes, maybe he loses, but he can go out with his head held high if he does, and he's going to get paid a lot more for it if he does.
I'll go to you, Gus. We talked about this briefly before the show. Your reaction to this move, Golden Boy trying to seek out a fight with Plant, and Plant's response. I think from your perspective, it's one of the things that kinds of turns you off on the sport because you kind of see, for lack of a better word, the okey doke for what it is and what they're trying to pull here. Your reaction?
The 168-pound division, Mike, is probably the most frustrating in all of boxing. We got to remember that people criticize James DeGale. Now, at least he went to the United States and tried to unify with Badu Jack. But the current roster of fighters, you've got DAZN, you've got Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith. A fight between them should be routine, Mike. It should have already have transpired in the United Kingdom, unification 2 belts. Simple. Alvarez, I think, holds the WBA regular. So if we're going on the virtue of belts, but Canelo never really does, Mike, surely a consolidation between him and Callum Smith, which is also an in-house fight. So the three of them, I don't know, they're just fucking around and doing absolutely nothing. But from what I'm hearing, Mike, is that the Canelo Alvarez and the Billy Joe Saunders fight is 95% made, Mike. Somebody messaged me that today who works inside the media. So I don't know. I'm a part-timer. Um, I have no idea. You guys are in the media, so but David Benavides and Caleb Flan, that is also a logical fight in-house on the PBC, whatever, Showtime, Fox Sports. So we've got two sides of the equation. They can be resolved very easily, Mike. But all of these fighters who are too busy calling out the other fighters, but the fights are not transpiring, and it's not down to Al Heyman or Eddie Hearn. It's down to the fighters, Mike. I've said it before. When a fighter becomes when his remuneration is sufficiently high to the extent that he's earning more money than the promoters and the television networks, it is the fighters who dictate the fights. It is not the other way around. I'm sorry, I do not accept that. If Caleb Plant literally went to Al Heyman and said, "Look, myself and David Benavides, we want that wherever, Texas or in Nashville, doesn't matter. I want that fight next." That fight will happen, Mike. Al Heyman is putting a lot of fights on pay-per-view, so both of them will be sufficiently compensated. There's no reason why that cannot happen. So it's definitely down to the fighters. I don't know who's to blame, but it's a very frustrating situation for the boxing fans all around the world. We don't know with Alvarez. 1 minute he's trying to entice Murata to a fight over in Japan. There were strong indications. We don't know which division he's going to operate in, Mike. There's whether people actually want the Canelo sweepstakes, but Alvarez is a master of controlling the narrative, and he wants to maximize any advantage, which he exercised with Sergey Kovalev as well. I don't know, Gal knows Cafe Duva, but from what I'm heard, he was not able to extend the fight to the early part of the year to have a sufficient enough rest. It was pretty much a case of having the fight within 8 weeks of the Anthony Yard fight, so to minimize his rest period as well. So the little invariables, yeah, Alvarez absolutely manipulates rehydration, weights, etc. So that's why I cannot, Mike, put Alvarez as the top fighter pound for pound in the world. Absolutely not. There's just too much bullshit around him. There's not a fight between fighters in their prime at their correct weight with a level playing field on both sides. It's just manipulating the equation and the situation because fighters he knows are desperate for the money, like Sergey Kovalev clearly was, given that what happened before in the Andre Woods fight, where whatever reason, I'm not sure, but I don't think he agreed some sort of a flat fee, or he agreed some weird I don't know, Gail, I'm sure can fill us in, but I heard that his money receipt was very, very poor. So he was a guy who needed a maximum payday, and he took the Alvarez fight. So, but the
You excuse me for interrupting. You mentioned narrative vis-a-vis Canelo. This is all happening around the same time or at the same time that Callum Smith also turned down a fight against Canelo, because I'm going to kind of blend this topic of Caleb Plant and Canelo, what we're talking about now, to a bit of the news here, which is that it looks like we're going to see Canelo in the ring against Billy Joe Saunders next. To your point, follow up here, Gustin, Gail, and Daniel. You can respond. Given the issue with the talk about a fight with Caleb Plant turning it down, the fact that Callum Smith turned down an opportunity to fight Canelo, and both he and particularly Hearn says that the reason was because the offer, in their opinion, was an offense. Given what you just said about narrative, what does that say about Canelo in terms of controlling the narrative, in terms of his power and his position in the sport, given what we just witnessed this week about fight with Plant? He tried to make a fight with that. They turned it down. Tried to make a fight with Callum Smith. They rejected it. And it looks like he's going to end up with Billy Joe Saunders. What does that say about one Canelo Alvarez from a business perspective?
He's a businessman, and he's a very good one. He's earning that money for a reason, um, because he's been very smart about his career, his positioning, his brand. His brand is super clean. He's a hero to a lot of the Spanish-speaking world, and he is doing everything possible to preserve that. Now, let's go back to Plant. Let's be clear. Plant did nothing wrong. Plant is taking the wise approach to not hustle up a fight that for him is dangerous.
Is the
And
difference between making $3 million now and making $5 to $8 million a year
oh
from
no,
now?
oh no, it's more like the difference between 2 and 12. And that's where we get to Callum Smith. Daniel Jacobs, who did not have a belt when he fought Canelo, got $12 million for that fight. Callum
Okay, I
Smith,
didn't know he got that much.
yes, he did. And Callum Smith and Billy Joe Saunders want the same money. It's like you find out that someone where you work who does exactly the same job and has exactly the same experience you do is getting paid triple that you are. Wouldn't you be pissed off? Hell yes, you would be pissed off. So Callum Smith, it doesn't have quite the same leverage as Saunders, because that's a belt holder that makes sense, that carries lesser risk. But so he's got a little more leverage, but still, the zone, Golden Boy, they don't want to pay those guys that kind of money because they aren't as big a draw. Jacobs is a big draw in the American audience, for the American audience. And remember, DAZN is still trying to get a toehold in the United States. Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith might be good fights, does nothing for them business-wise with DAZN. Nothing. But of the two, Saunders is the better known in North America. That's why they're aiming for him. That's why they're going to try to grind him down to the last dollar. The fight will get made. Everyone needs to calm down and make their Cinco de Mayo plans. And start reserving those avocados. There's going to be a shortage.
Same question applies to you, Gus and Daniel. We talked about the Plant thing. I mentioned the Callum Smith thing, and mentioned the fact that he's going to fight Billy Joe Saunders. It looks like next in May. You mentioned about you use this as one of your rationales for not praising Canelo, putting Canelo in the high regard that many others will. Given all this that's going on with Canelo, what does that say about him from a business perspective, Gus? And then you can follow up, Daniel.
One problem, Mike, which Canelo Alvarez has inadvertently created, is that he is what they call price inelastic, because he's been guaranteed an exorbitant amount, a contract divided over whatever it is, 295 million over X number of fights. So he has a guarantee. The problem now is that DAZN actually took a massive loss for the Sergey Kovalev fight. So these subsequent offers that are being tabulated to potential opponents of Canelo, that might be one of the reasons why these people are actually declining the offers, because they may in fact be derisory, Mike, because of the fact that if Canelo was getting approximately 35, 36 million for the Kovalev fight, and I think Kovalev may have received around 12 million. Now the fight did not recoup that amount from pay-per-views, gate sales, or whatever, however you break it down. So they've definitely taken quite a big loss with that, and they cannot keep replicating that model for all of Canelo's opponents. So, but the problem is what do they do with Canelo, because he's guaranteed that amount? So what do? Do you say to the other guys, we're going to slice up the pizza even more, even less now, so you guys are not going to get 12 million, you're going to get 3 or 4 million. So they're probably thinking between Callum Smith and Billy Joe, well, we may even be able to get a standalone pay-per-view in the UK. We might be able to generate more money from not only UK pay-per-view in on Sky Sports box office, but as well as DAZN in the United States. So their thinking may be slightly different. But it's the problem that Canelo Alvarez has created. It's no fault of his. They say, um, um, you know, the key is to negotiate, a contract, to maximize your earnings, given the shortfall of opportunity you have as an athlete. So credit to him, he's done that. He's got the biggest contract in sporting history. Fantastic, but um, it creates a problem with the division, Mike. Now, we don't know what's going to transpire. Now, Billy Joe Saunders, he left Frank Warren because Frank Warren wasn't able to get him a fight with Callum Smith. They had made an offer and Callum Smith had rejected it. So my line of thinking was that he came over to Matchroom. He wanted Saul Alvarez. So maybe that is going to materialize for Billy Joe. So at least he's honest to a certain extent of what he wanted. He wanted the Alvarez fight. He talked about that after the Lemieux fight as well. But it's regrettable that he's no longer the athlete now to contest a fight. He's going to get destroyed because he's past his peak, Mike, and he's abused his body so much that irrevocable elasticity he has as a slick sort of counter-punching slick athlete is gone now. So I think it's easy pickings for Alvarez. So that'll be one less party to the equation, and then maybe Callum Smith and Alvarez afterwards can finally fight. So that might eliminate some of the part on the whole DAZN situation. But whether the winner will fight the winner out of the PBC, Mike, I don't know, Mike, and I sincerely doubt that as well.
Sorry, I was on mute. Your reaction to all this, Daniel?
Well, nobody should be surprised by it when it comes to the business standpoint, because Gus is right in the sense, like, and Gail is right. Like, yeah, if you're Caleb Plant and you're smart, you're not going to take anything when it comes to being rushed, because even if you fight in and you feel like you're fresh and you can do any weight, your body needs time to rest, because let's face it, it's pretty common that fighters fight in divisions that are outside their natural weight. So they may be lighter than they come into, or more often not heavier in real life than they are in the fighting weight. And so you can't subject your body after 8 weeks of a training camp. Okay, you have a fight, and then immediately jump into 8 weeks of another training camp. Your body's not going to sustain that for a sustained amount of time, and that goes along with the older that you get. Now, the situation when it comes overall when it comes to Canelo, it does factor into it. Yeah, Canelo's getting paid a whole crap load of money, and people are going to want a very large piece of it. And let's face facts, the zone, at least in the American market, has not grown to the degree that they want to grow. They're mainly buoyed a lot by their international streaming service. Like they have a lot of business in Europe. Like they do pretty well with Bundesliga in Europe. But in the US, you don't really have that. And that's part of it is because you've done not a really, really good job of marketing the overall product, other than you try to say pay-per-view is dead, which we're going to know in a few weeks that it's likely not. And then second, you grab a lot of athletes that would be interesting to do it, but what do they actually bring to the fight? What does Steve Nash bring to the zone other than consulting? What does Marshawn Lynch bring to the zone other than just a little bit of name appeal and a bill for God knows how much detail in the car for emptying out all the Skittles from it? It doesn't do much, so they have to make up their money somewhere. And it's going to be a lot of times with a lot of these fighters. So, yeah, it is going to be very tough for Canelo to do it if the zone is the one backing the money. And let's face it, they're the ones backing the money. So he has to probably go outside of their pool or have somebody willing to take that pay cut. It's not surprising to me that Saunders would be the one to do it. Because, first of all, Saunders has been wanting to fight Canelo for a while, since middleweight. So that's not surprising in the least. Like they've always felt like he could outbox Canelo. Whether he can do it at this stage, I don't know. This stage of his career, I don't really know. But it's a fight that you can actually check out the bucket list. And it's actually a fight that Canelo can say, look, even at this shape, I fought a fighter that all of you accused me that I would never fight because he could beat me, and take that off the list. Whether it leads to anywhere else, that's the interesting part, because this is the thing that it comes with when it comes to Canelo. We have to remember that he technically did give up last year Mexican Independence Day to get the fight in December, or like I said, in the time of November with Kovalev. He gave that up. Is he willing now to do it again 2 years in a row?
If the money's right, yeah.
No, would you do it from a marketing standpoint? This is the main thing. Like, yeah, he could do it if the money's right, but what are you going to do if you're the top Mexican fighter? And this is more of symbolism more than anything. But if you're the top Mexican fighter and you surrendered Mexican Independence Day weekend 2 years in a row.
Yeah, it depends on who he fights. Just run it back in September and then fight a big name May 2021.
But who would you say that right now it's worthy from that standpoint, not the pure standpoint? Looking at it from
folks will still buy a Triple G fight, unfortunately. A third one.
That's the only fight. That's the difference. That is the only fight that the fans will actually allow that to happen in. But obviously, those two camps are so and have such animosity towards each other that I doubt we'll ever see that fight again.
Canelo doesn't want a shortening third fight with Golovkin. No.
Yeah. So, like, it makes sense. It puts him in a bind. Canelo, but the zone, yeah, I agree. The zone is in even more of a bind because they have to they have to help solidify this money, and it's very hard to do so.
So yeah, you was gonna say something, Gus?
No, no.
Okay. Um, put some last words on this, Gail, before we move on to any other possible news that you want to talk about.
Deals will get made, fights will get made. They aren't always the fights we want to see, but it has to make business sense because they cost money to produce. And we have to remember that. Also, these guys do not have an infinite time period in which to enjoy their career. The clock's ticking on all of them. So once they get, especially to a certain level, and to say nothing of the level of Canelo Alvarez, it is in their best interest to pick and choose. When their career is done, we aren't going to be there to help them feed their families. We aren't going to be there to give them all the attention, make their way easier. Once they step out of the spotlight, yes, I get it. They, still have a legacy. But the truth is, they got to take care of number one. And we may be disappointed at the matchups, but we should not criticize them for it. We should not. And I think we beat this thing to death.
Let's not talk about news here. Let's go straight to some preview. Should we really give that much attention to Charles Martin, Gerald Washington, or the Navarrete fight, or do you want to just jump right into Wilder Fury rematch?
Fuck
I will say this. Who doesn't love him some Emanuel Navarrete? That guy fights often, fights cheerfully, takes on all comers. There's not going to be much of a challenge for him this weekend, but it's a good showcase to put him in front of the fans, and we should enjoy him, who at this point of his very young career is very much the opposite of what we've all just been talking about. I like to also point out that the fight that might really be the interesting fight are the two super welterweights, Sebastian Fundora and Daniel Lewis. Sebastian Fundora is a 154-pound fighter, and I believe he is 6'4" at 154. It's crazy. And he's a head taller than his opponent. So it's quite the matchup. But Fundora is well worth keeping your eye on. But otherwise, we've got Amir Imam, we've got Javier Molina. They're on the off pay-per-view undercard early. And,
yeah,
Bob Arum has made no secret over the years that he doesn't think people give a shit about an undercard. He refuses to waste good fights that could be a draw somewhere else when he doesn't need them. And that's why his undercards, frankly, usually suck. And, these guys will get work, they'll get paychecks. There's always the possibility of a surprise. But truly, Navarrete is always worth watching just because he's such a stellar talent. And I'm very interested to see Fundora. This will be my first time being able to see him ringside.
With that being said, let's move on to discuss Wilder Fury rematch. They had a press conference today in Vegas. You're in Las Vegas. I'm going right back to you, Gail, to start the conversation, to kick things off, previewing this fight. The vibe in the city, what's the buzz surrounding that fight? Is there a high celebrity interest there? I know ESPN has been blowing this fight up as much as they can. Given your past experiences in Las Vegas for quote unquote big fights, how does this one compare?
Well, I wouldn't say it matches the top tier, but it's getting there and may get there. It's a slow build. We're still seeing the arrival of the British fans who do generally come out en masse to support their fighters. So that it's a little early. They're just getting there. But to your point, ESPN, Fox Sports 1, all the streaming services that they offer are pulling out all the stops. There could not be more promotion and airtime for this fight if we tried. There's nobody who could binge watch all the stuff being poured out. ESPN is staging most of its regular daily chat shows here on site at the MGM Grand. The various preview programs, interviews are, on fire. And then today we had broadcast live this pre-fight news conference, and this is a traditional event that happens on Fight Week. It's just that we don't usually see them broadcast live, and they usually are not quite so scripted. This was clearly staged for television. This is not the normal.
Man, was it? Man, was it?
Yeah. Well, when I say staged for television, I'm not talking about the actions of the fighter. I'm talking about the clock they had to hit, the breaks they had to take, the timing, the fact.
Yeah, what was up with that?
Well,
get going and then take a break here.
Well,
get going and then take a break. Stop!
Because it is, we do not matter. We do not matter. The media there, frankly, didn't need us. Didn't need us there. We were not really any part of the proceedings. Normally, a news conference would be far more collaborative, far more intimate, more dialogue. No, this was a television program that happened to use the final pre-fight news conference as its programming. So you've got to hit those, pre-assigned network commercial breaks. This is the exposure that they got from that was worth any of the constraints that they had to follow. But what that means is that the partisan Fox and ESPN broadcasters who are vlogging this within an inch of their lives, there's nothing but hype. The fight is really selling itself. Fans get it. There's a lot of anticipation from people who know about boxing. They don't need to convince us. They need to convince everybody else who has to decide whether they want to spend their $65 or $70 or whatever it is for the pay-per-view. And in many ways, the pay-per-view sales are going to determine what kind of fights we're going to see, at least for the next few years. Because if the two promoters, two networks coming together can all split a big enough pot and make money, because they have to share the money. It's not like just ESPN and Top Rank doing a fight. Half of it's got to go to somebody else. So there's got to be a big enough pie, a big enough pot for them to split. I would say if they don't get 1 million pay-per-view buys, this is going to be seen as a failure, because they give them all credit. They have not let a single opportunity for promotion go unattended. And credit to Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, and their camps. I have never seen two fighters give more interviews in the 60 days leading up to a fight, probably ever. Maybe Mayweather and Pacquiao. This is a throwback to when big heavyweight fights were supported by broadcast networks, when millions of people would watch. So that if they don't hit that 1 million figure, there's going to be a lot of hand wringing. If they meet it and exceed it, that will be the bell ringing to tell them, yes, we can. The risk versus reward ratio, the money to be made, is worth working together and making Spence Crawford happen. You want to see Spence and Crawford happen? Do you really? Well, maybe you need to convince somebody to buy that pay-per-view, because that is what's going to pull the trigger on more matchups across promotional firewalls. Will be this fight. And I'm not sure they can do it in today's universe. I'm really not sure, but they have if they can't do it, given as much effort as they've put in, then it's not doable anymore. It's just simply not. They really have done an amazing job. Not only is there not anyone in America who doesn't know about it, as we are doing this live podcast, just a few miles down the strip, a Democratic presidential debate is going on, and
Bloomberg is getting his ass whooped.
and Amy Klobuchar suggested to Bernie Sanders he go down to see the Wilder Fury fight. So it's even entered presidential politics. That's how big it's gotten. Today's news conference, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. All this background aside, the fighters themselves provided a little bit of dramatic entertainment, little bit of drama going on. And I have my thoughts as to how much of a card playing tell it was, as to the order of events in that little dramatic face-off. But I'll say that later.
Side note, shout out to L Dog in the chat. I think he came on trolling last week, but at least he came back on tonight to eat his crow. Funny little comment. He said, I can't believe I lost my mortgage off Feigenbutz.
Well, dog, that's a stand-up thing to admit. Good for you.
And Hand History Vault said in response to our discussion about Canelo, he said that Canelo came out yesterday saying he wants a third Triple G fight. He's open to it. He says Hand History also says, dating back from late last year, rumor has it that the third fight with Triple G has already been made. The negotiation's already done. Could very well be. Your reaction to that, anyone?
I think that's possible, and I think that's probably still at the rumor stage. I think we have to worry about a little more is it seems like Golovkin's physical health is kind of surprisingly fragile. It looks like
age, Gail. Age.
Absolutely.
He's 37 years old.
So we have to be a little bit skeptical and concerned about what his future in the ring is. His mandatory is being delayed due to I believe a right calf injury, something like that. Boy, that is an age-related injury. Absolutely.
That's called being 37 years old and having 15+ year career. That's what that is, Gail.
And they're brawling like a Mexican. That's the truth. It takes some wear and tear, no matter how well trained you are. So I think it really remains a very fragile situation.
I'll go back to you guys, bring it back to the topic of Wilder Fury, the rematch. Everything that Gail points out, she's right in terms of the need for this bout to sell well, and how ESPN and Fox Sports and all that are really going overboard to sell and hype this fight. Excuse me for being conspiratorial, and I take Gail's points, and I'm like, yeah, they're going all out, but we all know that there's probably going to be a third fight between these two. So, your reaction? Are you there, Gus? I don't think we have Gus there, so I will take it to Daniel. Yeah, I hear you. I hear Gail's points about them selling this fight so hard, but given that there's a stipulation where the loser, particularly if it's Wilder, has a 30-day window to seek a third fight, I'm like, they selling it, yeah, but we know there's a high probability these two big men going to fight again.
Well, you have to sell it from a variety of viewpoints. The fight itself will sell itself. Fury, like I said, Fury's already said that he's going to infuse the illicit Las Vegas economy after the fight. I don't know how his wife is going to feel about some of the contributions he's going to make to the illicit economy of Las Vegas. But when you look at the way they are marketing this fight, you're marketing this fight as a way to really justify a lot of things if you're on both sides. You have like if you're Fox, you have to justify some of the spending spree you've been doing lately. Whether it's been like I said, giving WWE an immense deal that you probably are regretting right now based on ratings. And you being the network that is saying that we stuck by the PBC when almost everybody else has walked away from them. The only other person that has not really walked away from them that is major has been Showtime, and that's been more of a necessity at this point, not a luxury for Showtime. On the ESPN side, you have to justify some of the money you've been spending. Also, as well, like, okay, yeah, Disney bought Fox, they bought the studios, so they spent a lot of money, but you also at ESPN, you spend a lot of money in the UFC. And what you've done is what you're doing also in this fight, where you can have the majority of your cards on the app, on the ESPN Plus app. But the big pay-per-views into it, you have to put it on pay-per-view because that's the only way you're going to be able to recoup things. They have to do this the way they're doing it. Now, is there a really high probability that you're going to have a third fight? Absolutely, because the way these guys, the way that this fight is selling, the networks don't really have to go as hard because Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury can sell the fights themselves. And they can do it because they have the personality to do it. So you don't always have to sell it as hard. And you also know the fact that going across the street to the zone to get Anthony Joshua is going to be hard right now because Joshua's now in that Klitschko window where he has to fight mandatories again. And that pretty much takes him out of any equation for a fight until at least 2020, like mid 2021, more than likely. So, yeah, we're gonna get a third fight from it, especially if it's a semi-controversial finish. It has to be like a definitive victory on both sides in order for it to trigger it. For the third fight to not be seen as something that you need.
I'll go back to you. I'll go back to Gus, and hopefully he got his tech issues fixed. I'll repeat what I was asking. I hear Gail's point, and she certainly is right to a lot of what she says. But the conspiracy side of me is like, okay, I hear about the how this fight needs to sell from a visibility standpoint for the sport in total. But I'm also thinking, is this about the sport itself, or is it about them? Given it's been publicly disclosed that there's like a stipulation in the contract where the loser, particularly if it's Wilder, has the right to seek a third fight.
Yeah, Mike, it's all superficial. Their modus operandi is to financially rape the public, and it has been for conglomerates like Fox and ESPN, billion-dollar conglomerates who've got so many subsidiaries and offshore companies, etc. So we know that, Mike. You've got joint venture in the US promoting the fight, and you've got pay-per-view in the UK as well. So I've become disinterested in the politics, Mike. The economics I understand because I tend to sort of do my own analysis and investigation, and I know that Fox Sports has not been breaking even from what they've shown in the US thus far. But it's only a small short fuel to their overall their overall in terms of their market share, etc. So it's less than 3% of their losses, so they don't. It's nothing to them, Mike. Um, they've got a lot. Wilder and Tyson Fury. Even the beef between them, Mike, is just purely. It's all manufactured. They've been very good friends for a hell of a long time. I'm sure they're in regular contact. Um, they've been calibrating the promotion, how to sort of elongate it, etc., so that they can get a third fight. It's all manufactured nonsense, Mike. It's all designed to financially rape the general public, as I've repeatedly said. And I've no interest in it, Mike. I'm not even gonna watch the fight. I'll watch it next day on YouTube.
With that being said, um, hand history in the YouTube chat said that yeah, the winner gets 60%, the loser gets 40% for 40% for a third fight. L Dog asked us, who are we taking? Who are our picks in the fight? Let's get down to that. Get the conversation started with Gail. Uh, Given what we just discussed about the kind of backdrop, the ancillary issues, the kind of inside baseball wonkish backstory here in terms of what in any when it comes to any fight, really, particularly one of this magnitude. Let's just delve into in the ring what each fighter brings to the table. Breakdown of the action from the first fight to this fight. Who do you have? Starting the conversation with Gail.
Well, that is a lot to unpack, and we're going to get only into a quick overview on this podcast. We have all, if you're listening to this show, you've already caught a lot of the buildup, a lot of the interviews, a lot of the YouTube chats, the podcasts. We all know what's going on here. This is going to be round 13, not round 1, round 13. Not all rematches are, but this one will be. There are several mitigating factors, mainly on the side of Tyson Fury. He's the one that has probably changed enough factors on his side to need a little bit of a reassessment. First of all, this last fight was no walk in the park. Unexpectedly tough fight with Swedish opponent Otto Wallin, not the least of which was a very vicious cut that threatened to stop the fight and potentially rack up it as a loss. It's not. His cut is nicely repaired. Will it hold up? Will it not? And let's also recall in the first fight, Fury was bleeding from the nose for quite a bit of that fight. He said today, when asked, what do you think is going to happen if Wilder going to target that cut? Well, what are you going to do if it opens up? And he said, I hope there's all kinds of blood. Let's have it. Oh, that'd be great. Oh, plenty of blood, in the way that Fury does. But I think that is something we're going to need to watch as an X factor in the fight. Also, as we all know, Fury has brought on a new trainer, Sugar Hill Stewart, Emanuel Stewart's nephew. Conventional wisdom in boxing is you don't change trainers right before a big fight. How much is that going to make a difference? How much impact will Stewart have or not have? How much impact will Fury's weight have? Fury is looking very solid. He's been very disciplined. He has a nutritionist working with him. He claims to have been living a very Spartan life here in Las Vegas, even giving up his beloved Diet Cokes just because he wanted to give up everything he could to prove how serious he was about the fight. But he claims he's going to come in 16 pounds heavier at approximately 270. That's a lot. That's a lot more body weight to move around, and it takes a lot more energy to throw a punch when you're that heavy. If you have added muscle, think of the average person picking up, 5 and 10 pound hand weights. You're going to tire out a lot faster moving your arms around than you are without those weights. Fury's got to take that into account. Meanwhile, Wilder cannot let Fury roll up rounds on the scorecard. But on the other hand, he's proven, and time again, that as long as he finds a home for his right hand, it doesn't matter. And I believe since the first Wilder Fury fight, Wilder has gotten less anxious and more confident that he can end the fight with a punch or a series of punches. And let's remember, the only fight Wilder did not win by knockout or TKO was against Tyson Fury. And that is only by the grace of God that Fury got up and beat that count. So I think Wilder has less adjustments. He's only gained confidence, in my opinion. And the little dust-up news conference, to me, was very telling. Both men have had a lot to say to each other. They don't really have a lot of animosity between them, not in the way that, say, Canelo and Golovkin do. But they understand this is business and only one man can win, and they need to be the one that does. And they're willing to express themselves about it. They're both very, very confident guys. But at today's face-off, they got yapping at each other, jawing. We start here and I'm going to knock you out. You're a dosser, the usual. And who was the one that lost his temper first? Who shoved who first? It was Fury. That tells me that he's the most concerned and he's the most nervous. And in a 50-50 fight like this, where both men have the talent and the skill to overcome the other, the fight is won and lost first in the mind, in the focus, in the confidence, in the belief you can win. And I think the one that has got it over the other, who will be able to impose this game plan because of the mindset and the confidence, is Deontay Wilder. I'm calling it for Deontay Wilder, although we'll still have to see how they look at the weigh-in. I don't think the weight is really going to help Tyson. I think this talk about I'm going to knock him out in 2 rounds is absolute nonsense. But may the best man win. And the one thing I really hope for the fight, no matter what the outcome, is that it is definitive and non-controversial.
I see L Dog in the chat says that you don't change trainers before a big fight unless your trainer is Ben Davison. I kind of think the opposite, Gail, in terms of the fight. I think it's Wilder who has to make the adjustments, because in the first fight, he was outside of the rounds in which he scored knockdowns. He was clearly outboxed. I know he said he had some physical ailments heading into that fight, but from a technical standpoint, he didn't have a clue. Not one in there. I think Fury is going to be in better shape. If Wilder wins, it's going to be by knockout, but that's his only way to win. He cannot outbox this dude under any circumstances, in my opinion. I'm going with Fury here, hesitantly. Though I will say, I would not be one bit surprised if Wilder wins by KO. That's his best shot to win. To me, that's his only shot to win. I wouldn't be surprised if the knockout would happen early, mid, late rounds. But if he does win, he has to find a way to adjust to the technique and the skill set of Fury. Find a better way to get home with that right hand on a more consistent basis. I'll go to you, Daniel, and then Gus. Your thoughts on the fight itself in the ring?
Okay, in the ring, this is very interesting because you have to look at what each guy has done in the middle to train and what they've done in between. Now, one thing I can judge when it comes to Deontay is always how he has done in rematches, because he's had two. One by WBC fuckery, and one because it actually meant something. The one by WBC fuckery was Stavern. We have to remember the first time he fought Stavern, that's the first fight where he went the distance. He won the title from Stavern. And you can still make an argument to this day that it was probably his best technical performance. In the rematch, he didn't even let it go to round two. He just ethered the living daylights out of Stavern. Now, the second rematch you can look at is Luis Ortiz. The first fight, if the seventh round, if Luis Ortiz was quicker to the draw by about probably 10 seconds, he would have beat Wilder. That fight would have been called. And it took Wilder multiple knockdowns in order to put it away after, like I said, having the toughest scare of his career. What happened in the rematch? Wilder was being outboxed and pretty much losing almost every single round. But it took one right hand. A punch hit so hard that you saw all of the sweat leave Luis Ortiz's head. And it was a wash from that point. You take that into account, you had this fight Fury. Deontay knows he can knock him down. He's done it twice. If you go by the pattern, there's a good chance that Wilder could easily end this fight. But what makes this fight particularly interesting is that Fury has shown that he will outbox Deontay Wilder. And he will do it relatively easily. The problem is going to be, though, what is in his head mentally. Like, I agree with you, Mike, from a technical standpoint, Wilder has to be the one that makes the most adjustments. From a technical standpoint. The thing is, unfortunately, with Fury, a lot more of it has to do with how he's prepared mentally than it is with technical stuff. Because of the way he has come back into the rings. He's faced the Otto Wallins and the Sephiris of the world in order to prepare for this type of fight. And yeah, he's talked about like I mentioned, he's talked about, like, I'll knock him out in two. I can picture the combination. Oh, he's a tosser. He's a bum. But then he also talks about at the same time little things like, hey, after this fight, I'm going to go on a binge of coke and hookers. That doesn't tell me you're mentally prepared to be in the fight. And I agree in that sense. When you saw that shove, the person that normally instigates the situation is normally the person that has more nervous, because he has to show that he's not scared of the situation. And to me, Fury's kind of showing a little bit that he's scared of the situation. Wilder's remaining as calm. He's playing the Deontay Wilder character as good as he can. So in this fight, I'm going against actually my better instincts. I'm picking Wilder by mid-fight knockout. I could see exactly a repeat of the Luis Ortiz 2 fight. Wilder losing on every single card, but he lands one right hand and it's over.
Certainly, the scenario's in play. I wouldn't argue against that scenario happening. It could very well happen. I'll go back to you, Gus. I know you kind of showed your disgust at the whole thing in its entirety, but do you have any word on the actual in-ring action between these two men?
Yeah, Mike, the technical aspects is what really interests me now. I've been actually recording a fight study today on how to defeat Deontay Wilder. And I've been using a lot of the scenario of this Luis Ortiz and Wilder's second fight to sort of illustrate what my beliefs are. Because I've seen a hell of a lot of videos regarding why Wilder was being systematically outboxed in that fight and what he did to knock out Ortiz. And I don't mean to be arrogant, but a lot of them are factually incorrect. And I'll try and explain a little bit of that fight, and it brings into context of what may or may not transpire in this fight. Now, there is a school of thought that Deontay Wilder uh, cannot fight on the back foot, and if you press him, he will capitulate. And I think that is incorrect, massively incorrect. I don't think these people understand the fighter. Now, Luis Ortiz was able to win all 6 rounds of the fight and be knocked out in the 7th for these specific reasons. Now, Luis Ortiz established lead hand control for the 6 rounds. Wilder's lead hand mic is specifically a rangefinder, nothing more, nothing less. It is not a hard, authoritative jab designed to breach the defense. It is not. It is about setting up his right hand. So whenever Wilder poured out with his lead hand, Luis Ortiz always met and tapped his glove, double tapped his glove, and he would jab above Wilder's lead hand, so he established lead hand control. Wilder could not establish the range on his right hand. Now, Wilder tried to circumvent that by, you know, moving a little bit, stepping back, a little bit of feints, but Ortiz is a very good as a southpaw. Now, Wilder's problem was that because he couldn't establish range with his lead hand, because he has such a wide stand, Mike, Ortiz as a southpaw was able to get not only lead hand control, but he was able to get his lead foot on the outside. So Wilder's lead foot becomes a massive problem, Mike. It kind of exacerbates the problem when an orthodox fights against a southpaw. So because he couldn't get the range on his lead hand, so he didn't know, so he could only fire speculative right hands. But because Ortiz had lead hand and lead foot control, he was able to pivot to the right. He could anticipate the right hand, and Wilder's right hand would go whizzing past Ortiz's head. Ortiz was able
Well,
to move it.
the problem is Gus is that Wilder he uses his front foot he pivots. He should be
No,
pivoting. He pivots off the wrong foot as a result.
it's Mike. Your mobility is massively compromised when you've got such a wide stand, because you can't move side to side that much because of your stance is so wide. You have to bring, so he tends to lean more, and that's what he does with his right hand. Now, when he brings his left hand, he he doesn't take too many steps back to create the distance. He does when he's up against the ropes, and that's how he knocked out Ortiz the first time. He started leaning back and countering with the right hand. So because of his elasticity in his body, he'll tend to do that with his right hand. Now, when he brings,
Yeah, that's what I think we're trying to say the same thing in a different way.
but
He has that lead foot out so much front when he should be having it back, be pivoting off the back foot that will give him mobility. He has his front foot so far out there, he often pivots off of the front foot, decreasing his mobility.
see, look, Ortiz was able to, because he's a shorter heavyweight, he would double up his left hand, get underneath the punches. So he would come in on the inside and it would work. Sometimes he will vary the tactics and hit on the body, but this is the problem. Like at the end of the 6th round, Luis Ortiz was extremely tired. Now, this is what Wilder and Al Heyman were banking on, like realizing that, he's a veteran. So all those who think that Ortiz's age has no validity, they are massively wrong. Ortiz's game plan was beautiful for the first 6 rounds, perfectly calibrated. But the problem is that he couldn't, the longevity of the game plan couldn't be materialized because of his age. So what happened in the seventh round, Mike? Ortiz was so tired, rather than coming out and meeting Wilder's jab in the middle and getting lead hand control, not allowing Wilder to establish, what he did is he resorted to upper body movement instead because it didn't have the energy. And occasionally, so Wilder for the first time was able to get full extension on his left hand. And if you look at the film analysis that I'll subsequently publish tomorrow, you can get a spirit level, Mike, on the screen, on pause it, and you look at a 90-degree angle. So Wilder finally had lead hand control. So what he did then is he's punching angle. He brings his knuckles up on his right hand. So when it's down, he's not going to fire it. But when he turns his wrist to the left, 90 degrees, so it's pointing towards 270, so the knuckles are up. And it was just a simple 1-2 that landed. Ortiz is so tired. He was just blocking punches literally in front of his face, Mike. He never had the reflexes at that point, so it was a devastating knockout. And that is the reason why Wilder was able to knock him out finally, because he was able to establish range for his right hand as a result of a tired Luis Ortiz who had no longer had the energy to sort of block his lead hand. So that is Deontay's Wilder. So my point is, Mike, going into this fight, now, the best way to beat Deontay Wilder is, and I think Ben Davidson is right, is that you've got to maintain distance with him, Mike. Over 30 of Wilder's knockouts have accrued when fighters have been aggressive and tried to walk him down. They've literally walked onto a right hand.
No,
So
you can't do that. Not with him. No.
yes, so pushing Wilder back, I think, is a strategy designed for failure. I think that is when he's at his most dangerous. You have got to maintain distance with him, and that is why the two fights he's at a draw. The Mbain Stavern, where he fought on the back foot because of an injury, so he couldn't really set up his right hand as well because he's moving exponentially around the ring. So the distance was always there in that fight. That is the reason why that fight went on to points, and the reason why the Tyson Fury fight as well. So there's no coincidence, Mike. There's actual real concrete validity to my arguments. Fury was fighting. He was maintaining distance and moving. The two mistakes he made, he was stationary for both of them, and he was ducking into the punches, and he was fortunate that Wilder only landed grazing punches. Wilder managed to change the calibration of his punches, started aiming a little bit lower, and yeah, they weren't clean punches. They were just, Fury was fortunate because Fury doesn't even look at the punches, Mike. Against the Wallin fight, he rotates his head to the right. His defense at short range is terrible. And I think he's fortunate that Wilder doesn't have an inside game as well, because otherwise I think a Wilder left hook on the inside would be dangerous for Fury. So
Well, that's how Cunningham caught him with them short punches.
yeah, absolutely. Until Fury started just thinking, fuck it, let me just try and walk him down, use my size and strength to actually knock him down. And I think it worked in the end. So I think strategy plays a key part of this fight. I think if Fury is looking for a knockout and he's trying to walk Wilder down, then I think he's going to be in trouble. But I think he's playing 3D chess, Mike. I don't think that's his nature. He's always been the defensively minded, conscious fighter. I think Sugar Hill has been brought in not only to improve his punch technique. Yeah, he may have to sit down on his punches, Mike, because he may not get the decision on the cards, even though it's co-promoted, whatever. But I think Deontay Wilder is still the A side, and it's still in the United States. So yeah, he wants to be aggressive and try and go for the stoppage. I don't blame him. I think that might be the wise strategy, but I'm not sure whether it's going to work out well for Tyson Fury. I'm going to have to go with the puncher, Mike. I think Wilder will probably knock him out, Mike. I'm not sure which round. It could happen early, it could happen late, but I'm gonna have to go with Wilder by knockout.
Yeah, conventional wisdom is that Wilder's going to catch him this time in a rematch and finish him off. That's why I hesitantly go with Fury, because I think he's going to be in even better shape. I think he's going to learn his lesson in terms of how he got caught in that first fight, and he's just the overall technically superior fighter. And Wilder hasn't been put in a position to learn from a technical standpoint. I don't know why. I don't know why, but the fighter from a skill standpoint, um, the things that I saw in the Stavern fight, I haven't seen it since. And I think for him to truly learn and be complete, he probably will have. He's going to have to lose because he believes so much in his power. That being said, that right hand is a devastating ass punch. Arguably the hardest shot in boxing, and it would not be one bit surprising if that right hand will pull him to victory in the rematch. Gail, she had to leave because, like I said, like we said at the beginning of the show, she is in Vegas covering the fight. She's been attending press events really all day today and all week for that matter. She needs her rest and whatnot, and she has other matters pertaining to covering the fight for Communities Digital News. One more thing, and this is specifically to you, Gus. This has been a while since she's been on here. We talked about this briefly last week. We're both big fans of the little guys. We kind of boxing geeks, nerds in that way. While you're on here, your reaction to the news regarding Kosei Tanaka, who was initially held, given the label as super champion by the WBO. He subsequently dropped that WBO flyweight belt, petitioned the BO to be named number one contender for Ioka, Kazuta Ioka's belt, and they granted him that. He's a mandatory now. They have, I believe, either 20 days or a full month to make that fight. So a fight that we talked about here on Pound for Pound over a year ago, it looks like
Yes,
it's going to happen soon.
it's a it's a fantastic fight, Mike. You know, as you mentioned yourself, me, Daniel, Gail, we've all spoken about it. Me and you in particular, we predicted it 2020, Tanaka, Kosei, and Ioka Kazuta, freeweight, four-weight world champion. It's for me, Mike, personally, the best fight in boxing, and it surpasses even this heavyweight fight. But that's just my proclivity. It's not about the lower weight fight. It's the quality, the individual quality of both fighters, and the fact that Tanaka's achievements are so overlooked. You know, he's he's not far off Vasily Lomachenko in terms of his achievements in becoming, a multi-weight
Far
world.
off, not far off. He's
Yeah,
equal,
yeah.
and I would argue he surpassed in terms of
But
overall talent level of opposition.
but people just, people are not even aware of his resume and his achievements, let alone his ability as a fighter. So it's always going to be the weight, Mike. It has been all this time, and it always will. It's just the discrimination of humanity in terms of fighters at that particular level of the pendulum compared to the heavyweights. So it's just ceteris paribus, as they say in Greek, Mike. But um, in terms of the quality of a matchup, it's you've got a you know Ioko is a very well-rounded fighter. We've saw that against Cinturon recently, who was a great opponent for him. He's his ability at 115 pounds is there to see. He's definitely brought up his attributes, and Tanaka, you got to say, not even having a warm-up fight at 115 pounds, going in straight for Ioka, who you can argue is number one, Mike. We talked about it before, how Estrada and Gonzalez and that previously had opportunities, but they never fought Ioka, who was desperate for those fights. Um, maybe he won the Donny Nietes fight as well, so he's been very, and the Amnet Ronrang fight, so he's been wronged. Otherwise his resume would be significantly better. But as a fighter, Ioka is 100% top 10 pound for pound, and so is Tanaka Kose for me, Mike. So two fighters on the pound for pound, a mouth-watering fight. A little bit too early to give a prediction, but that is one that I'm sure in due course we'll talk a lot about. And let's hope that the fight will be picked up in the United States by ESPN or DAZN or whoever. So finally, that these guys can showcase their skills to a much larger audience and because they definitely warrant the respect and the recognition as well. So it's great to see, and let's hope that the balls of these fighters, that, and we know the Ioka's, he commands the amount of television. The amount of television audiences for Ioka, Mike, is even more than Inoue as well. He can get up to 15, 20 million. So it's a massive fight that on a world scale that cannot be underestimated. So yeah, fantastic. Cannot wait for it, Mike. And I'm sure we're gonna have to do a live stream or something, Mike, when the time comes.
And to your point about coverage, given Fuji TVs and their associations with in their past dealings with ESPN Top Rank, they have carried previous fights of Tanaka on ESPN Plus. Ioka's win over not Centron, but his previous opponent. His name escapes me right now. The Filipino fighter that he fought to win the vacant title that was aired on UFC Fight Pass through Fuji TV as well. So hopefully, ESPN Top Rank, if you're listening, UFC Fight Pass, if you're listening. Even the zone, if you're listening, do yourself a favor and pick up this fight. Couple of comments before we start to shut things down. L Dog says it annoys me when I see Spence on the pound for pound list and no Tanaka. Official scorecard boxing science says he thought Ioka won clearly against a Nietes, but it looks as I'm not the only one seeing a close fight. L Dog is mentioning Donnie Nietes. Triple J is mentioning Donnie Nietes. That's kind of the unknown guy here. I'll just say that. I'll just pick up on that briefly. Nietes, he defeated Ioka December 31, 2018, to win a belt at 115 pounds, WBO version at the time. We hadn't heard from him since. And I've been scouring the net. I've been scouring Filipino sources and trying to translate boxing news from there. I've been scouring Twitter and whatnot, and I've heard nothing of Nietes. So in a strange twist, he moved up to 115 pounds to seek big fights. Yes, he beat Ioka, but we haven't heard from him since, and that's a disappointing thing. And look, I think
he's
go ahead, Gus.
Mike. I think Donnie is covertly hiding in the shadows. I think he's waiting for Gonzalez, Mike. We talked about
Let's hope so, because he doesn't have much time. He's what, 36, 37 years old. So time's a wasting here. And I would agree with L Dog on this statement. Look, I think Errol Spence is a fantastic fighter. I really do. It's a wait and see how he looks coming back post the accident. However, people who want to put Errol Spence up on pound for pound list over Kosei Tanaka, I question how much they follow the sport. I question how much they pay attention to the sport, because to Gus's point, Kosei Tanaka is just a fantastic fighter. If you want to prove me, if you doubt me, just check out some of his fights on YouTube. Check out some of his fights on Daily Motion. He's reaching his prime, particularly over the last, I would say, 2-3 years, where he has gotten better and better and better each time you've seen him in the ring. Just a terrific fighter, top 10, arguably top 5 fighter in the world. And I think we're going to end the fight. To Hans History Vault, Junto Nakatani and Gamio Magrano, they're going to fight for the vacated WBO flyweight title. That fight is going to take place April 4th in Tokyo. Get your words out right, Mike. So yeah, those are the two combatants who are going to fight for the vacant belt at 112 pounds WBO version. Going to shut the show down on that note. As I said before, Gail, she had to dip out early. She's in Vegas covering the fight for Communities Digital News. If you want to talk boxing, small business, media, because she does media teaching and training on the side. You can check her out on Twitter at PR Pro San Diego. As I said, she writes for Communities Digital News. You can check out her articles on boxing at Communities Digital News. That's COMMDG DIGI News.com. I'll go to you, Gus from Corruption in Boxing, aka part-timer. For those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk music, let the folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say a massive respect to all the folks who joined us in the panel. Really good guys who I've interacted with for a little while on different podcasts. Big hello to Triple J, L Dog, B Space, Han History, Duck, and all of the other guys as well. I hope you guys are all well. Yeah, Mike, I've had I've been a bit of a recluse in terms of my own channel, but I'm looking to kickstart it. I'm really looking. With my technical knowledge, Mike, I'm focusing more on film studies, etc., and as well as writing and doing possibly even a documentary on corruption in the sport, etc. So there are some projects that I'm slowly putting together once I have the time between different jurisdictions that I operate out of. Hopefully, I'll find the time this year to sort of push forward with those projects. But big shout out to Jacob as well, and to Bo, our respected other panelists. And by the way, Jacob, your podcast on the best war films, fantastic. I've got one for you. Best war film of all time for me, 1968. It came out, Where Eagles Dare, featuring the late great Richard Burton and a very young Clint Eastwood. If you haven't seen it, people, watch that film. Absolutely fantastic. But respect to Mike, to Gal, Daniel, and to everybody else as well.
And yes, certainly. Shout out to Jacob. Also, shout out to Bo. Thanks, Gail, for joining us earlier on the show. Shout out to everybody here in the chat. Official scorecard, boxing, Triple J, L Dog, Hand History, B Space, one of Duck. I think I saw Duck in here earlier. Sean Fitzgerald, Olaf. I want to thank them. Be sure, folks. If you like what you've heard, everybody in the chat, please hit that like button. If you like what you've heard on the show, please hit the subscribe button. Also, make sure to subscribe to Pound for Pound Box Report on Spotify, on iTunes, and leave a review. 5-star review will get read here on Pound for Pound Box Report on a future episode.
Just very quickly, Mike, hello to Official Scorecard, who's got a brilliant channel. He did a fantastic sort of film analysis on Roman Gonzalez a little while ago, Mike. Go over to his channel and check it out, Mike. He was replicating his fighting style and his footwork and his combinations, etc. It was one of the most intuitive videos I've seen. So he's got a Official Scorecard. He's got a fantastic channel. Really good guy to speak to as well. So hopefully we'll get him on the panel at one point to chat some boxing as well.
We'll do so indeed. I'll go to Daniel. Last but certainly not least, I'll go to Daniel. Daniel from the Inscriber, for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk NBA, particularly the Miami Heat. He did an excellent short little audio on SoundCloud discussing the Miami Heat and the deals that they regarding the NBA trade deadline. For those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk NBA, let the folks know where they can find you, Daniel.
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Rawkus99, RAWKUZ99. And definitely catch me up next week. It's either going to be right at that night or on Sunday, where me, Joe, and Francis are going to get together and do, like I said, launch the pod for the new year when it comes to Fury, when it comes to Wilder, and definitely catch us in. And I'll say this because everybody's been saying this before when it comes to All Star Weekend. Everybody wants to clown on Dwayne Wade for the score that he gave in the last dunk to Aaron Gordon, even though
Oh, that was bull.
I agree. I agree. Aaron Gordon won. To me, Aaron Gordon won. But that does not excuse the fact that Candace Parker gave a 9 to Derrick Jones Jr.'s last dunk. I forgive Chadwick. He's not a bad. He's just an actor. Candace Parker knew better. So if anything, Dwayne Wade was retaliating against Candace Parker.
Boo. That's all I'm going to say. Boo. Aaron Gordon should have won that dunk contest, but that's another topic for another day. For those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk music, for those who want to talk fitness, you know what it is on Twitter, Brother JR at Brother JR76. As I said at the beginning of the show, if you want to find out all information regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, the blog page is the place to go to, p4pboxreport.wordpress.com. Top right of the blog page, you'll find the links where to find us all over social media, where to find us on all RSS feeds that carry podcasts. Where you can donate, got a Cash Me and PayPal donation link. Let donation be the best nation. For those in the U.S., we all know it's tax season. If you got a little spare change after you get your refunds, I don't care if it's $1, $2, $5, $10. If you want to shoot a little more coin, please do so. Donate some change to Pound for Pound Boxing Report. It will help the overall production of this podcast. And last but certainly not least, check out the link to my online coaching page. I am an online coach for Beachbody.com. If you want to check out, I should say I do fitness challenges monthly. Let's Build Together fitness challenges I try to do every month. So if you want to participate in that, if you want to check out any programs on Beachbody, like, old school P90X, the Insanity, 6 weeks of the work, PIO for the ladies and whatnot, P90X, the P90X series that runs the gamut from P90X and P90X3, Shift Shop, Lift for those who like to lift weights, Lift 4. I've done it myself. Excellent excellent program for those who like to pump iron. Check me out. We got two free 2-week trials that run throughout the year. So if you're interested in supplements like Shakeology, please check out my fitness page on Pound for Pound Box Report blog page. On the next episode, we will do a in-depth recap of the rematch between Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, and we will do a preview of the DAZN card on February 29th in Frisco, Texas. Mikey Garcia making his return to the ring following his loss to Errol Spence. No, he fought since Errol Spence, excuse me, but he's making his return to the ring. He's fighting Jesse Vargas on the undercard of that. The return of Choco Latito in terms of the big scene, as he's going to challenge Cal Yafai for Yafai's WBA junior bantamweight title on that same card. A very, very exciting flyweight who made plenty of noise last year. A little dynamo, a little terror. Kind of a savage little flyweight Roberto Duran, in my opinion. That's how I like to describe him. Julio Cesar Martinez, he's going to be fighting on that card as well. We mentioned Tanaka. He's also a fantastic little flyweight to keep your eye on. So, all those fights are going to be happening again on the 29th, Frisco, Texas. We will do a preview of all those fights. Again, I want to thank everybody who joined us in the chat. If you like what you heard, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe. And also, please leave a review, iTunes, Spotify, and whatnot. Want to thank Gail, who joined us earlier. Want to thank Gus, Daniel from the Inscriber. This has been episode 282 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. I am your host, Michael. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.
Good night, folks. Catch Wilder Fury in AMC theaters.
And last but certainly not least, rest in power, Jeanette Dubois, a.k.a. Walona from Good Times, who passed away last evening at age 74.